Sure, it's been a few years. Patrick Wood, thank you for joining me again in the trenches.
Good to be with you. You're the guy that, by the way, you're the guy that coined my intro that so many people use these days. I'm the living expert on technocracy.
Is that right?
I think that was you.
Sure.
That was the shortest introduction I have it in the whole world. I'm not sure what it means. I'm the living expert. Well, I'm not dead yet. Not yet.
I don't remember saying that, but if I did say that, that's very clumsy wording.
I thought it was brilliant.
Well, it's literally true, so that's also a good start, I suppose. You and I have been trying to do this recording for a couple of weeks now, and just for those who aren't aware, Patrick, I had some serious issues with electricity and the road being chopped up, and then the fiber optics being cut and everything. And now we are here, and thank you for being patient.
What could go wrong?
That's a great segue into technocracy. Living in Africa has many pros and cons. Obviously, having a very broken, chaotic system means that you have a lot of inefficiency, a lot of inept governance. You have infrastructure that doesn't work, but that also comes with a sense of freedom, because in a highly functional society, it's much easier to control loads of people.
Yes, I think you're right. And I wonder too if on the other hand, I wonder if our fate, like in America, is going to be about the same as Africa at some point, because our grid, for instance, our electrical grid, is so fragile right now. It's just waiting for a disaster, I think. And with all the AI data centers coming on, they're online. They're just sucking all the power out of the grid. At this point, it's going to be really crazy, I think. So we're gonna experience some of what you've been experiencing, I'm sure.
There is an upside, though. The silver lining is that it forces somebody like me and my wife to become more self-reliant, to
Yes.
trust less in the authorities.
Yes, you're absolutely right. This is going to be this will be a mass awakening, I think, all across the world.
Going back a few years, your work was the first that I discovered in the realm of technocracy, so to speak. And I think your book, I forget what it's called now. It was years ago. The Road to Technocracy, I think it's called. You've written many, but that particular one.
Technocracy Rising.
Yes, that one.
Yes.
That one just completely flip-turned my perception of reality. And it's amazing how the COVID era has done that for a lot of people.
Yes, exactly. I was really the first guy this kind of discovered technocracy in the first place. That this goes back 18 years now, and I can't believe it. When I look back on the journey that I was on, I didn't even know exactly what I had my hands on when I first discovered historic technocracy. But it didn't take me long. And I had help from other people as well. I wasn't probably in a position to understand it altogether, at least philosophically, positionally, etc. I had some great help from other experts in the field. One philosopher, another guy, just a researcher from Canada, actually, who discovered the archives of the technocracy movement in Alberta. And I had to go. I packed my bags, and my wife went with me, and off we went to an adventure in Edmonton, Alberta, to go through all the archives that were established at the university up there. It's an amazing story. So here I am today. All that stuff that I digested and put up in writing, initially articles like that's the only thing you can do at that point, to just write some articles and see if they fly. Then my book came out in 2015, and that was Technocracy Rising at that point.
Well, let's assume that I don't know anything. What is technocracy?
They said it was a science of social engineering. That was the first thing that they led with. Beyond that, they talked about resource management, taking over all the resources of the world, including people. They viewed people as resources themselves, lumped in with the animals like the cattle in the field and the sheep and so on. And so they envisioned creating an economic system that would serve all these people, all these entities, and it was cradle to grave, and I wouldn't say it. They didn't envision necessarily slavery. They didn't use that word, but that's essentially what it was. If you're kept all your life by people who want to manage you, they want to force feed you a diet, they want to control all your activities everywhere you go, etc. That's not freedom for sure. That's slavery. And we see this tendency today with all these people now who want to micromanage you to the max extent.
When you talk about the historical they, are you referring to people like Hubbard and Howard Scott?
Exactly. Now, this whole thing, however, was invented. It was codified. It was. They were talking about it long before 1932, but that's kind of when it got codified at Columbia University, and that was the seat of progressivism at the time, and still is actually in America. But this is where the whole thing was invented in the first place, with scientists and engineers, mostly from Columbia, not exclusively. But somehow Howard Scott, a blowhard and a con man, he found himself in a position of leadership, and he conned Columbia University into accepting their whole study group. And they got resources from Columbia to do the studies, etc. And the willing participants were the science and engineers at Columbia at the first place. So this was during the Great Depression. That was a horrible time in America. Well, everywhere, but in America especially. They thought that capitalism was dead. They were sure that it was good. It was all over for capitalism and free market economics. So they wanted to create a new type of an economic system. This has never been done in the history of the world, ever. Nobody ever came up with an alternative economic system. I checked. I had to check when I discovered and like 18 years ago, when I first discovered technocracy, they said there was an economic system. I never understood that. I never, in my studies of history, never had a clue that somebody actually did this. Well, they did. And it was just kind of swept under the carpet for a while. It came back with forming a trilateral commission in 1973. But before that time, it was just basically, it was Howard Scott for one thing. He was a con man, in my opinion. But then he was teamed up with M. King Hubbard, the well-known oil man that created the peak oil theory in 1956, I think it was. And he separated from the technocracy movement because he was working for Shell at that point. So for whatever reason, he just distanced himself. But he was a co-founder of Technocracy, Inc. with Howard Scott. And interestingly, Howard Scott found himself living in the apartment rented by M. King Hubbard in New York City. And he was living on the couch. He had no money. He had no money whatsoever. And so he basically, he was well, not a beggar, but he was totally flat. And so Hubbard kind of helped him through that period. And then, of course, once they got the membership organization started, Technocracy Inc., it was called, incorporated, then at that point, there was some money coming in, and Howard Scott eventually took a salary.
What I'm trying to wrap my head around, though, is that this is, about 100 years ago almost. What do you think they were thinking at the time? I mean, technology was very different.
I'll tell you, this was an epiphany to me when I even now when I consider where they were at Columbia University. There was only one building back then. It was Hamilton Hall. It was called that's what there's only one building, put it that way, but it had a full footprint basement. The basement was used for temporary projects like Technocracy. And they gave one half of that basement to the Technocracy group, study group, they called it. And these were mostly the scientists and engineers from Columbia. These were brainiacs, really, of the day. In fact, one of the guys, I can't remember. I can picture his name. I can't pronounce it. But he invented the Department of Engineering as a discipline, even at Columbia. This guy was a brilliant guy. So they shared that basement with the early iteration of IBM. That's where the tabulator. The first tabulator was invented, built in that basement. So all the brainiacs from IBM were commingling with the brainiacs of Technocracy. Just consider the possibilities now. What would they talk about at lunch, for instance, or after work or whatever? Well, they were all at that point. They were all futurists, and I think my guess is that IBM especially had already identified the trajectory where technology was going to go as far as computing was concerned. Now that was way long ago. From now, we can see all the stuff that's happened since. But when you analyze the requirements that Technocracy set out for itself to achieve itself, it was predicated on data processing being some in play. So I think it wasn't a formal brain trust for sure, but you can see where these people had a vision of the future, where technology was going to play a major role in the formation of a new society and a new humanity.
But that there is an interesting point. You say they were sort of futurists, they had a vision. Is this, do you think, what they wanted, or do you think they were just seeing where it might be going?
This is exactly what they wanted. They were very, very deliberate with their doctrine, if you will. It wasn't a doctrine exactly. It was kind of, they treated it as a scientific project. Very disciplined, very rigid. And when they wrote out their requirements and in fact, I have a book here if I can find it. I don't have it right now, but the Technocracy study course was created by Scott and Hubbard, like in 1934. That was a very detailed specification for Technocracy. It covered every aspect of it, and this stood the test of time. And that book today, if you read it today, it's just exactly what's going on. The mentality, the mechanistic attitude that all these people had. They were in a vacuum for sure, because nobody else was looking into them at that point to give them any guidance. So they were in a vacuum, in a like a circular loop, and they're talking to each other. So, but nevertheless, it was very disciplined, and this they knew exactly where they wanted to go.
I remember a few years ago, I think it was the early 2000s, there was a documentary film that came out. What was it called now? It was one of the first ever that sort of hinted at a technocratic future. I'm trying to think of the name now. I've gone completely blank. It'll come to me. Zeitgeist. Do you remember that film?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And I remember thinking at the time, "Oh, this is bonkers. This is ridiculous." Now
yes.
I'm looking back at that and going, "Okay, all right. I think they had a point."
Yeah.
But what I was going to ask you, Patrick, is 1932. Was it just a coincidence that Huxley published Brave New World?
No, it wasn't. Huxley was from England, of course. And the president of Columbia University at the time, his name was Butler, Nicholas Murray Butler, who spent most of his time, or at least half his time, in Europe. He was a hobnobber, and he loved the royalty. He was best friends with Mussolini from Italy. Oh, that's not that. We won't talk about that, but who knows? He was himself, Butler, kind of unplugged from reality. He lived in another world, not an American world, because he just liked to schmooze all the royalty and stuff in Europe. That was his life, and so Huxley had a taste of him somewhere along the way when he was talking about technocracy, and that was the big thing that was being talked about at that point, because he was a guy. He had a huge ego. He was a guy who brought technocracy to Columbia University, and well, he kicked it out eventually, because when he discovered that Howard Scott was a con man, he just went ballistic. You don't do this to a guy like that. So the whole movement got kicked out. But the run-up meetings before technocracy was at Columbia University. There was 10 years or so of meetings from they called them themselves, I think, the Technical Alliance, something like that, just a discussion group. And so this thing was ramping up, and it hit pay dirt, if you will, when it came to Columbia University. So yes, absolutely. 1932 was the time. That was the date that Brave New World was released. And if you look at it from the point of view of technocracy, it was absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on.
But then, as you said, the movement kind of held. It didn't go anywhere. And I mean, just a few decades later, you had people like Rockefeller and Brzezinski, who were also involved with the Trilateral Commission. Now, that's also interesting, because now you're seeing the idea spreading.
Exactly. It was interesting that Technocracy Group, they never got any money from like Carnegie, Rockefeller, et cetera, back in the day, 1932. They could. I think that would have happened if not for Howard Scott. He spoiled the whole thing single-handedly.
How?
Because he was a con man. Everybody understood eventually this guy was just full of hot air. And a lot of people didn't like him personally, and he just he fizzled. So if he had been legitimate, a real scholar, if you will, like from Columbia, he probably would have had some support from the institutions back then, but he didn't. And remember, Columbia University was very close to the Rockefeller family in the first place, and the Carnegies as well. But that was a source of money for all kinds of things in that day, and including IBM and the Hollerith computer project. So when Howard Scott just kind of tainted the whole thing, nobody wanted to touch him. And that just kind of fizzled down until 1973. Actually, before that, when Brzezinski wrote his book, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era, that book was written about technocracy. He didn't use that word. He used technotronic, but essentially that was what he was writing about. When he wrote that book, he was a professor at Columbia University, political science professor. He was on site, if you will, where this whole thing was created in the first place. Well, there was no overt talk about technocracy after about 1932, because it just flipped it flipped Butler on his head, so they couldn't talk about it. But it was still there. The scientists and engineers who were running the show in 1932, they were mostly still alive when Brzezinski was overlapping with them at Columbia University. He probably talked with these original people at length, and so when he wrote this book, Rockefeller immediately picked up on it. And the reason why this is my studied opinion, I guess, because I was studying the Troutwater Commission going back to 1977 or so. Rockefeller had a problem with money. He was a chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank. He had and of course he had all the oil fortune behind him as well. He had a problem with money because he saw the handwriting on the wall that sometime in the future, money, fiat currency especially, would be destroyed. It would have to destroy itself. And what do you do if you want to maintain your wealth? If you don't have money as a calculator, what do? Well, you get your hands on the resources then. If you have all the resources in your pocket, it doesn't matter what kind of a monetary system you have. If people want it, you can, say, give me your firstborn. I'll let you live. So Rockefeller understood that technocracy was a way for him to control the resources of the world directly, and that's exactly what has happened since him. So. Brzezinski was more of a strategist, for sure. I wouldn't say that Rockefeller was ever into technocracy like other people have been, but he used it mercilessly and intentionally to get his way. He wanted to get all the resources of the world, as many as he could, into his pocket and out of everybody else's pocket. That includes like national assets, personal assets, farms, real estate projects, etc. The farms of the world, the agriculture, all this stuff has been consolidated. Is unmistakable at this point over the last 40 years how these industries have been consolidated into these giant corporations at this point, right? So
sustainable development is pretty much the largest agenda in the world, and it is all based on exactly that.
Yes, it's a resource-based economic system. Everybody understands at this point that sustainable development, and they said, it's all over their literature as well. It's all about resources and resource management. That's their game. That's always been the game for technocracy. Has always been about resource management. So, in 1992, when Agenda 21 conference was held in Rio, you have all these people that the United Nations brought together. I think there's 20,000 people converged on that conference that produced Agenda 21. There was a parallel conference that was held at the same time called the Biodiversity, the Biodiversity Convention, I think it was called. But they were joined at the hip. Everybody talks about Agenda 21. They don't talk as much about the Biodiversity Convention, but they were all together in one place. Well, what happened with that whole thing? If you back up from 1992, you realize that the person that put the doctrine together, a lady by the name of Gru Harlem Brundtland, she was tasked by the United Nations to write a book, a study called Our Common Future. That book became the doctrine, the foundational doctrine of sustainable development, and the United Nations has admitted that she was the mother of sustainable development, period. That doctrine came from her. It just happens that she was a member of the Trilateral Commission. You can't make this up, honestly.
It's just a coincidence.
Just coincidence. Well, there were other people at that time that were writing about sustainable development. She had a compatriot at the time. His name was, I think, Jim O'Neill, and he also wrote a study for the Trilateral Commission concerning sustainable development. So the two of them together certainly created the doctrine of sustainable development on behalf of the Trilateral Commission. This is to me, this is absolutely stunning. Nobody picked up on it except probably me at that point. So I just, guys, hey, you look over here for what these people are doing. It's absolutely insane. But this is where Agenda 21 came from, and this is where sustainable development came from. This is where the biodiversity switcheroo came from in the first place, and we're suffering on it under it now. And one of the substantial things that happened, by the way, the concept of biodiversity was changed. Before that, what would come up in somebody's mind if you ask them what to define biodiversity, they would say, well, that must be like all the species of the tree frogs and in the forest and the swamps and the life on Earth, right? Life on Earth, all the ecosystems. That's pretty much what people would have said before that. But the doctrine of biodiversity was changed to include humans in that mix. We were never considered formally part of the mix, even though the Technocracy group almost 100 years ago, they included people in the mix, but there was never a formal definition of it. They said, well, we're going to manage the humans as well. But because humanity was included all of a sudden into the definition of biodiversity, that gave all of the United Nations the mandate at that point to control all of the resources and the people as well in the world. We see, for instance, the World Health Organization. They're unplugged. They've always been unplugged, but we see them micromanaging. What gives them the right to dictate our health as individuals and as a society? What gives them the right or the thinking that they could do this. How it's inconceivable. But this is exactly what they've done. They've made us into animals in the field to be managed.
And that's why that's why you get people like Bill Gates saying, well, there are too many people. We've got to find ways to reduce the population.
Yes, exactly. You talk about population reduction. This is a theory that's age-old theory. Herd management. When you have too many deer in the forest, what do? You send out the hunters, right? To thin the herd. This has been, going back thousands of years, I'm sure, that hunters and society figured out, well, we have to, if we have too many animals, or they'll destroy themselves, whatever, so we have to thin the herd. This is exactly this concept that they're practicing today.
Wasn't it also politically adopted a few decades ago on behalf of, was it MIT and Malthus? I forget the limits to growth document, something along those lines.
Yes. Limits to Growth, that was produced by the Club of Rome. That was another Rockefeller establishment, by the way, a think tank. Well, it was a think tank, I guess, in one sense, but they produced that. That was their book, The Limits to Growth, and it basically espoused technocracy, the control over people, and they've written other books, I think, since that kind of reflect the same theory. And when you consider how that played into the Rockefeller takeover of this whole thing in the first place, you can see exactly where it fit in, the scheme of things, right? And most people never really saw the Club of Rome as being a Rockefeller organization, but it was, because it was originally formed in Rome, which is outside of Rome, in a villa that was owned by Rockefeller himself. So he was the guy that called the meeting and put the brainiacs together. Hey guys, come up with something. I want to do. I'm just paraphrasing here. I want to create something that lets us get all the resources in our pocket. So cook something up, would you? And get back to me on it. Get a report out of it, and we'll run with it. Well, the Club of Rome they were the people that concocted this whole climate change nonsense. And it was very sterile at that point. Say, guy, we're going to do this. We're going to trick everybody into doing this, and we'll herd the whole world, and we'll stampede the whole world into this sustainable universe, and we'll take over at that point. And they were so crass at even suggesting that, but they said that their conclusion was, well, that mankind is the enemy. Mankind itself was the enemy. So we're going to turn humanity against itself to destroy itself, so that we can get all our hands on all the resources of the world. This was so ugly, in my opinion, just absolutely stunning. But that was Rockefeller. That this is one reason, by the way, that I say Rockefeller was not for technocracy per se. He was all about getting the resources. So, hey, let's manufacture something to get this thing kick-started.
But, I mean, the whole idea of depopulation is also so absurd if you just open your eyes. If I fly between Cape Town and Johannesburg, it's about a 2-hour flight. and I look out the window for most of that flight, easily 98% of that entire flight is just nothing underneath me. It's empty land, maybe some farms.
Yes. Yeah.
But yet I'll have conversations, Patrick, with people that they'll say to me, yes, but we are overpopulated. Just look around you. Well, that's because we live in a city.
They've never been outside the city to know.
It's weird.
But yet, it is. And the same thing here. I mean, when you can fly from any city at point to point, Phoenix to Denver, for instance, it's all open land. There's nothing. You don't see hardly any towns. At night, you can see a few towns because they have lights. But otherwise, America's empty. But people say, oh, we have to, get the population rearranged or whatever.
Let me play devil's advocate. So the idea of technocracy is society being run by engineers and scientists. It sounds pretty good. I live in Africa and things are very broken and chaotic. Why would it be a bad thing?
Well, for one, the whole thing was disingenuous from the get-go. It was a fraud from the very start. But people will argue today that, well, because politicians have failed, society has failed, whatever, and you need technology to run your affairs. However, that excludes personal autonomy for you. They'll make all the decisions for you, for your life, and you won't have to make any at all. Some people think that's a good thing. I don't. I think I would say probably if anybody thought about it, I don't want that level of control. However, the technocrats of the world, especially in America, they're overhyping everything they're doing at this point. They say, "Oh, it's going to be wonderful. You can see, it's just around the corner. Utopia is going to be upon us. Productivity is just going to soar. Everybody's going to get rich. Everybody's going to be healthy. We're going to live forever." This is basically Brave New World on a hype machine. And, it's inconceivable that people would buy this crap, It sounds good.
I'm being facetious, obviously, because if you just think about it, the COVID era was a very good example of a form of technocracy. Every single government everywhere just locked down everybody and tried to centrally control our health.
Yes. Let me just say one thing about this. When COVID hit, by February of 2020, I made a prediction that this was technocracy's coup d'etat, not based on the virus itself. The shot was not in view at that point. But when I saw all of these universities, for instance, the universities in England that were formally hyping climate change, global warming, with bogus studies, corrupted data, etc. When I saw these data scientists at universities flipping over to the COVID narrative, that was the only clue that I needed at that point to make that prediction. Because formally they'd run out of steam with climate change and global warming. They couldn't get any traction at all at that point. And so they flipped en masse over to supporting the new threat of the virus. That was technocratic, because all these universities, they were all bought off by Rockefeller money and the grants and so on that they get in the first place. These so-called data scientists, they were just they were repurposed, put it that way, maybe, to support now this new narrative about COVID. That was a coup d'etat of technocracy at that point. These people have been waiting for this for all these years. First, the fear of God was put into people because of global warming. Now the fear of God is put in them by the virus. That's all it was. It's just pure sham.
And both of them are invisible.
Yes.
So you can't fight it. You don't know how to argue it.
Exactly. It was a brilliant plan. And if you look at it that way, these people, they could not have achieved their purposes more directly with any other plan. If you're going to fight something, make sure there's the enemy is invisible, because it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Well, speaking of the enemy being invisible and everywhere, what do you then make of something like AI?
Yeah. AI is not, at this point, it's not being viewed as an enemy. That's probably a big problem, in my opinion. It's being embraced by everybody in the world. Young people, with companion apps, for instance, with AI being introduced into government systems, like in the United States, where AI now is taking over whole agencies in our government, top to bottom. Actually, it's being used in state governments as well as city governments as well. So there's a universal adoption of AI. Certainly there's some people who are anxious, like business owners might be anxious about it, but they're going along with it anyway. It is invisible in that sense, but it has very profound effects on society, because eventually it'll end up with in a situation of scientific dictatorship. So maybe this was the ingenious thing about AI, that it is invisible in that sense. You can't touch it, you can't feel it. It exists in the computers. But if I had something like a thumb drive here, which I have in my hand, if this was an unlimited size thumb drive, say it had, I don't know, terabyte of data on it, right? If this thing weighed 1 ounce when I got it in my hand, and now I load it up with 1 terabyte of data, you know how much it weighs now? Same thing. It doesn't change. So the physicalness of data is non-existent. It exists to be processed in a computer, ones and zeros, electricity, etc., but it has no mass. This is kind of striking. It's so invisible you can't even hardly measure it.
I don't know what the individuals 100 years ago were like, but we know what some of them today are like Elon Musk. He's very likable.
Remember that Elon Musk's grandfather was head of Technocracy in Canada in the 1940s. So he understands technocracy very well, I have to say. And he's also the richest man on the planet right now. He's the chief architect of technocracy today. And some people love him, other people hate him at this point. But he's a grandstander. He knows how to make his case. He started his own political party now in America. I think it's called the America Party. And he thinks he's going to bust the two-party system in our country, Democrats and Republicans. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But you can see there's an agenda underway with technocracy, with people like him and Peter Thiel, David Sachs, Mark Andreessen, all these people from the original PayPal mafia in Silicon Valley.
And now Palantir.
Yeah. So you can see their agenda. They have an agenda for sure, and they're playing it out very carefully, I might add. So, Elon Musk is kind of he's you can identify him as being on his own mission. He's not influenced by other people, I don't think.
You don't think by Trump?
No, I don't. Not at this point. All of his dance with Trump leading up to the election, where he put all the money into the election to get Trump elected, and then all the friendship they had after that, and now it blew up, and now he hates Trump, and they're at odds with each other, and Elon Musk is doing now the America Party. He's going to pursue his own vision, his own dream, all based on the Dark Enlightenment philosophy. Now, that's
Mentions Moldbug, I think. Hey,
that's exactly right. That's Curtis Yarvin and Nick Land, also from England. But this business of the dark MAGA and the dark enlightenment, this is so twisted. This is technocracy. This is the political expression of technocracy now. And what these people are trying to achieve is basically to set up a monarchy in America, where there's one leader that basically runs the whole country like a startup, and basically, they're going to destroy democracy altogether and the constitutional democracy that we have. And this was their agenda from the get-go. So you see, going back with Musk, for instance, you see when he bought Twitter originally, what was all about? Well, he got a base of at least 700 million users with Twitter. It has survived and is still here now. And he said, "Oh, I'm gonna promote free speech. I'm gonna be a free speech absolutist, whatever that means." And nobody questioned that at the time. But now the conservative movement and others have moved to Twitter now en masse, to where now Twitter is being used, the feed off of Twitter is being used to train his AI system called XAI, that's Grok. And now you also see that he has a vision to create what he calls the everything app, kind of like WeChat. And he wants to bolt in a payment system based on crypto. He wants to have social credit scoring system, kind of like China has. And so you see his vision started with the acquisition of Twitter. Since then, all of the tech bros have moved away from the left into the right camp. They've all centered around Trump now, all of a sudden. This was disingenuous as well, because they were never political in the first place. They'll use whoever they can. So the tech bros went over to Trump, like Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, all these people that used to be the leftists in our country. They just flip-flopped over into Trump camp. Now that Trump is in, five months in, he's signed important legislation for technocracy to be moved ahead. People are asking now, do they need Trump anymore? Is Trump a loose cannon now that needs to be disposed of? And I think you're going to see this in the next few months, where maybe after our midterm elections, in any case, I think you're going to see a high likelihood that Trump is going to be dumped from the presidency, and that will leave our vice president, J.D. Vance, to be advanced to be president, right? Well, it just so happens that J.D. Vance is a creation of Peter Thiel in the first place. Peter Thiel was the guy that got Vance elected as a senator in Ohio. He gave tons of money to him to be elected. Then he positioned him to get be the vice president to run with Trump. Well, Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance are on the same wavelength, because Vance never had a job outside of Peter Thiel. When he got out of law school or Yale, the only person he worked for was Peter Thiel. He was groomed by Peter Thiel to be where he is right now. So they've set up a situation now where Trump could be discarded, if you will. If Thiel's vision is realized by advancing Vance into the presidency, it's game over for America at that point.
What is your view on Trump?
Pardon?
Sorry for interrupting. What is your view on Trump? I mean, he comes off like a blockhead, and he's very self-important, and everything's beautiful, and America first, and he's going to be the first to do everything. What do you make of him? It's hard to have an opinion that doesn't change, like with the wind. Well, today, if he does something good, everybody cheers. Well, he's like the border is more secure than it was before. That's a good thing. He's probably done some things to promote a little bit of religious freedom in America, maybe. But I mean, he's not a technocrat, do you think?
Not exactly, but he's played the role of a technocrat, nevertheless. There was an article that I ran on Technocracy News in, I want to say, probably 2017, maybe 16, I think it was 16, that suggested that Trump was a technocrat. That's a great article, but I think it made the point. He was advancing, or he was supporting initiatives that were clearly technocratic in nature. That was the only point. We see now he's all on board with anything that technocrats want to do. Cryptocurrency, AI in government, etc. Supporting the data centers all over the country.
Stargate.
Stargate, yeah. So this is a continuation of his policies from his last presidency, and but on the other hand, it doesn't mean that he is a pure technocrat. He has no engineering background at all. I don't think in fact, somebody reported that he doesn't even use a smartphone. So, okay, well, there's people like that they're in business, but they don't want any part of technology. They run everything in their head. That seems to be Trump, and so he's obviously favorable towards the technocrats at this point. he's advancing their agenda all over the place. But I think in the end, if they count him out, if he's downsized, so to speak, or he's excessed, that's the human resources term that we use in America. If you're excess, that means you're hit the road, Jack. That would be a perfect power play at that point to capture the presidency, to put all your people in place. This has happened in Washington D.C. already with Doge, for instance, that came in and swept the whole country with AI and personnel replacement. So Trump, on the other hand, he has a huge base with the MAGA movement. That was a cult of personality, I think, by and large. Is it genuine? Well, I think the MAGA movement is going to be splintered into 1,000 pieces in the end. I think it's happening right now. So where will that end? I don't know, but my guess is there's the possibility that Trump could be the most hated president in history before he's done.
So technocracy is essentially a central control grid where everything is centralized and decisions are made for you, and you don't really, you're kind of a slave, but you don't have physical shackles around your ankles.
That's right.
Like a 15-minute city where you'll start getting penalized if you go beyond those borders, that sort of thing. But if this has been building for the last 100 years at least, is it even stoppable? I mean, how do you resist? How do you push back?
At this point, it's probably not stoppable. I can't conceive any way that can be stopped at this point. You'll have, for instance, federal troops guarding these data centers that are being erected around the country because if people wanted to blow them up. So you're going to see there's going to be a huge put it this way, the teeth, the iron teeth are going to they'll be bared when push comes to shove on this whole thing. I think you're going to see the crackdown on free speech. You're going to see a crackdown on society. You're going to see a crackdown in mental health.
But we already saw that down the last few years. They literally stopped people from moving.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Today, I did this statistic yesterday. I found there's 200 million people, mostly young people around the world, who are using companion apps. They're freely available on the app stores, like on Android and iOS, Apple Store. 200 million. That I just counted all the subscribers that they said they had. And consider 200 million young people being immersed into AI with a imaginary friend, if you will, or girlfriend or man friend or whatever. Imagine the psychosis that will result from this escape from reality. It's stunning. We've never seen anything like this in the history of the world. And now the systems like Grok and OpenAI, they're openly promoting their own versions now. They haven't released them, I don't think, quite yet, but they're releasing at some point their own version of a companion app that will remember everything about you, and it will direct you in your life. You know,
I already have one of those, Patrick.
Pardon?
I already have one of those. It's called my wife.
You got it. You're right.
She knows everything about me and everything that I'm about to do also.
Yes. That's good. I remember that one. So we face these type of problems. The technocrats are driving this on purpose, though. That's my point. This is not just oh, well, it just happened, and so it happened. Deal with it. No, that's not how this happened. These people are openly promoting anti-human systems, democratic systems, anti-civilization systems, intentionally. There's no mistaking anything about it. It's absolutely just crazy. And this whole philosophical thing that's driving them at this point is so bizarre that normal people, maybe I'm not normal, I don't know, but I think I am, but normal people would look at this if they understood it and say, you can't say that, you can't do that, or whatever. But this is so weird, this philosophy that they've adopted at this point. The technocracy is weird by itself. But when you layer on all this nonsense with the dark enlightenment that Curtis Yarvin's talking about, that Peter Thiel is in love with Yarvin in the first place, and Elon Musk is basing his American party on Yarvinism, and you understand how dark Yarvinism is. This guy hates society. He hates democracy. He hates basically anything that has to do outside of direct control over your behavior. And we've never faced this before. This type of an ideology. Humanity has never faced this en masse. And how can we get rid of it? Well, you can't get rid of it until you understand how evil the philosophy is in the first place and reject it. But people are not rejecting it at this point. And this is really disturbing.
I said right at the very beginning of our conversation that living in a place like South Africa or some African country or some place that's generally seen as backwards could be a safe haven later on, at least for a bit longer.
Yes.
What do you think?
I think you're right on one hand. I could see that. On the other hand, we see people like Bill Gates, for instance, going into African countries, rather, to test his crazy genetic schemes and his medicines and vaccines and all that kind of stuff. And the people eat it up. I guess they have no other choice. But
I think it was in Kenya where he did a horrible one. I can't remember.
Yes, yeah. He's been well. You can understand probably his logic. I can't test this in America because they'd hang me. So let's go.
Yeah, we can test it on some poor black Africans. Nobody cares about them anyway. that would be his thinking.
Exactly. So another aspect of testing technology outside of the United States and maybe Europe as well, I don't know, but at least out of the United States, we've seen gain of function research on viruses farmed out to China, right? in the first place. That they couldn't do this. They couldn't do this legally in America. They would have been shot creating viruses like COVID. So they farmed it out with money given to China to develop the virus in the first place. Okay, then it came back and destroyed our country. So you have examples of this where, for instance, surveillance technology is being exported to Ukraine and other countries. Turkey is another one, where it would not play in America to do this type of thing, but for Ukraine, that's a perfect place for Palantir, for instance, to test the software. And who cares about Ukraine? There's a hot war going on, and it doesn't matter. And so they're re-importing this technology back to America again. We've seen this, in Kenya, for instance, the shots that were so lethal to us were tested in other countries, like in Kenya, Africa. This has been a pattern over 50 years at least, maybe more, where Americans were not used to test anything. The evil stuff that's been developed has always been developed and with other legal systems, with other societies. And when they got their way there, then they figured, now we can bring it back to the rest of the world.
It's coming for a landing, Patrick. It's a rather grim outlook that you've presented. I was hoping for a silver lining, for a bit of hope.
Well, here's the worst that silver lining exists is right here. It's right here. In America, I can't speak for any other country, but in America, people have purposely almost declared themselves to be brain dead to all this stuff. They won't think. They won't think about it. What it means, if they want it in the first place at all, or if they just go along with it and say, well, hey, that's life. Stuff happens, stuff changes, and so my life is going to be different in the next few years. And I'll lose my job and I'll never be employed again, and I'm going to be kept by the state with universal basic income, no problem. People don't think that way. They think, well, how can I get food on my table next week? I'm worried about next week, not next month, not next year. But if people were willing to think this through, they would immediately reject it. They would immediately reject it. And remember, in the 40s, people in America threw technocracy out on its ear. They political cartoonists, for instance, were depicting technocracy as a devouring monster that was eating New York City. They got the picture. They understood where it's going. But this mindset has been lost now, and you see the people just embracing this thing, or they willingly ignore it. But if they would just engage their brain to think about it for a while, they would understand, and that would be the first line of defense if people would do that. The second thing is people need to get out in their own local communities. Forget national. That's gone. But they can protect themselves if they get a hold of their city councils and their boards that run their local communities and stuff. Educate these people to don't let this stuff come into our community. There have been many communities in America, for instance, who outlawed facial recognition technology and the police departments and elsewhere. they just said, no, we're not going to do it here. You don't read about those stories, but because they're all suppressed. They never see the light of day. So there is hope on a local basis that you can do things to protect yourself against the incursion of things like AI, surveillance, etc. But at this point, most people are asleep at the switch, and they don't want to go in. They don't want to even meet their city council members. They don't know them. They don't care to meet him, and so they get a free pass. I hope this resonates for anybody in the world, but especially in America. If you can't engage your own brain to think this through and come to a better conclusion, then don't complain what you get in the end. That's all I can say.
All right, Patrick, how can I keep up with your work?
Technocracy.news. That's the simple place. Technocracy.news.
You've been to South Africa, if I remember correctly.
Long ago. Not recently. Do you want it? You want to hear the story?
Yes. Tell me quickly.
In the 1970s, I teamed up with a gentleman here in America. His name was Don McIlvaney. We started an organization called Americans Concerned for South Africa.
Oh.
We changed the name to Americans Concerned about Southern Africa, but nevertheless, we started out with South Africa. When we saw the attacks being launched by the communist forces, Marxist forces moving into Southern Africa.
From the Angolan side.
Pardon?
From the Angolan side.
Exactly. So we saw a threat. And so we wanted to get American legislators, journalists, whatever, to see what's going on down there. So we sponsored trips to Africa or South Africa and Rhodesia as well. Angola, we had one in Angola as well. And so we had we set up geopolitical tours where our groups could be addressed by your leaders, military, police leaders, legislators, etc., and journalists as well. And this is how it came to an end. There was a blood contract issued on the founder, or the guy, Don, who was in South Africa. And, we couldn't go back again. The police down there told us, if you come back here, you're going to get killed one way or another. And that was when the ANC basically was in charge of everything. And they hated our guts, because we were the force standing against them, and we were exposing them to the American press especially. So,
well, they still control everything today.
Yeah, I know. Nothing has changed.
No, but I do hope you make a trip here again in the future.
I would like to. I love your country. I really do. I have so many friends from South Africa over the years. I don't know how that happened, but we developed a kind of a friendship with a bunch of people, and now they had children and grandchildren, whatever. We just kind of grew up with them, right? But I love your country. I always have.
All right. Well, on that rather pleasant note, Patrick, let's go home. Thank you for joining me in the trenches.
You bet. My pleasure.